Were the Picts actually exotic outsiders who migrated from across the sea? Or were they one of the truly indigenous peoples of ancient Scotland? Well, modern DNA research has shed light on this debate, and the results are fascinating. So in this video, we'll look at the truth about Pictish DNA, what this means about their exotic origin stories, and how it relates to your genetics today. For instance, is Pictish DNA closer to people from Western Scotland or Eastern Scotland today? We will answer these and many other questions in this video. But quickly before we look at that, let's get a very quick overview of who the Picts actually were. Now, the Picts were one of the ancient peoples who lived in the northern regions of the land we call Scotland today. They were likely related to the earlier Caledonians, but the term Pict is actually a Roman label. The Picts were first referenced in 297 AD when a Roman writer spoke of the Picts and the Irish, meaning the Scots, attacking Hadrian's wall. The name is thought to mean painted ones, due to the practice of body painting or tattooing. Yet we don't know what they called themselves. Now, one of the problems when tracing the history of the Picts is that they didn't leave us massive volumes, they didn't have a massive written history of them, of where they came from, etc. But one thing they did leave us is their incredible and mysterious standing stones. If you look at this image, this is the stunning Aberlemno Pictish Standing Stone 1. It forms a group of various stunning Pictish stones in eastern Scotland that are well over 1,000 years old. Now, the top symbol looks to be a serpent or a snake, and the bottom is a mirror and comb. The middle symbol is much more mysterious, however. Even today, we still don't know what it means and don't know what the Picts called it. We call it the double disc and Z-rod today. The symbology is unknown, but some argue it represents dynastic identity, acting as a crest or a name to mark lineage or territory. Another interpretation views the discs as celestial bodies, like the sun and the moon, with the Z-rod symbolising a path or a lightning bolt. Others argue it's more practical, representing a wheel or a chariot of some sort, or stones used for grinding grain, with the Z-rod representing a stalk of wheat. Various other theories are out there as well, and please let me know what you think in the comments below. Now, to finish up the overview, in 843 AD, Kenneth MacAlpin is said to have unified the Picts and the Gaels into the embryonic Kingdom of Scotland, known as the Kingdom of Alapa, and the distinct Pictish identity faded by around the 10th century. So the Picts are one of the foundational peoples of Scotland, but what do we know about their DNA and how does it relate to your genetics? And does modern DNA research support the idea of an exotic origin, or did they have a local origin? We know, for instance, that some primary sources around the time of the Picts said that they came from Scythia, a region in the ancient world north of the Black Sea, around modern-day Ukraine. The 8th century Northumbrian monk Bede wrote about this, for instance, in the Ecclesiastical History of the English People. He wrote that the Pictish race from Scythia sailed out into the ocean on a few warships, and were carried by the wind beyond the furthest bounds of Britain, reaching Ireland and landing on its northern shores. They were denied land by the Gaels there, however, but they were directed to settle in what is now Scotland, on the condition that Pictish kingship followed the maternal line, since the Picts had obtained Gaelic wives from Ireland. Now, this is part of the origin story that Pictish royal succession passed through the female line. Others have argued, however, that this origin legend had a different purpose. It was mainly intended to legitimise particular kings whose claims to the throne were through their mothers. But what does the DNA evidence say about all this? Well, one of the best academic studies was done in 2023. It was published in Picts Genetics and it analysed 8 Pictish genomes, 7 of which came from the Pictish Cemetery in London Links in Fife, eastern Scotland. Now, one of the headline results is continuity. The paper demonstrated genetic affinities between the Pictish genomes and Iron Age people who lived in Britain, which supports current archaeological theories of a local origin. So their DNA was close to other ancient Britons rather than representing an exotic population. This of course runs contrary to an idea of a Scythian origin in the recent history. Now if you're enjoying this video, please consider subscribing, and if you would like access to member-only videos, please check out the top link in the video description below. Thank you for your support, and now on with the video. Now another key finding and fascinating result of this study is when they compared these Pictish genomes to modern populations across Britain and Ireland. They found that there are broad affinities between the mainland Pictish genomes and the present-day people living in Western Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland and Northumbria, but less with the rest of England, the Orkney Islands and Eastern Scotland, where the political centres of Pict land were located. So in other words, Pictish DNA is closer to people who live in the likes of Western Scotland today compared to the Orkney Islands or Eastern Scotland. But why is this? Well, a key reason is because the DNA of Western Scotland is closer to Iron Age Britons, and has remained more isolated than other regions, relatively speaking anyway. Orkney in the northeast has had a major influence from the Vikings and was then under Norwegian control until the 15th century, leaving a major Scandinavian signal in Orcadians' DNA. The southeast of Scotland, on the other hand, had much more impact from the Anglo-Saxons, including when the Kingdom of Northumbria stretched up to the southeast for large periods, up to Lothian and parts of Edinburgh. Yet even if we remove the influence of later migrations and invasions, another finding from this study was that Pict land in its own time was not genetically homogeneous. Instead, it comprised a complex mixture of closely related Iron Age British ancestries. This study found, for instance, that Orcadian Picts were somewhat distinct from mainland Picts prior to any Norse influence being a factor. This was largely due to long-term isolation and strong genetic drift in the Northern Ireland. The authors add that this suggests that the Pictish culture spread to Orkney from Scotland primarily through cultural diffusion, rather than direct population movement or intermarriage. And in relation to the matrilineal inheritance system of the Picts, the results suggest that it is unlikely that the community at London Links followed this system. Although the study does caution that this is just one site, so how representative it is of all of Pict land is debatable, and this is a limitation of this paper in general. But what about Pictish haplogroups? Well, if you look at this table, this is the breakdown from the study. Unfortunately, only one male Y DNA haplogroup was properly extracted, but he belonged to R1b DF49. If you look at this breakdown from family tree DNA, you can see how common this marker is in Ireland, the United States and Scotland. And this is in fact a branch downstream from R1b L21, a key marker in Scotland and Celtic Britain today. If you look at this map, you can see how common it is in Western Scotland, Ireland and Wales, places that reflect more Celtic or Iron Age British ancestry. It was likely brought into Britain by the bell-beaker culture, however, around 2400 BC or so. In general, Pictish Y DNA markers were dominated by branches of R1b L21, such as RL1335, a common branch among Scots today still. Other markers would have also been found in some Pictish males, such as I2A, a legacy of Western hunter-gatherers. Now on the maternal side, you can see that branches of J1C3 were the most common. And if you look at this, you can see the family tree breakdown of this broad marker. J1C3 appears at low to moderate levels across much of Europe today, including in Britain and Ireland, and in places with a lot of European ancestry, such as the United States. This branch ultimately traces back to Near Eastern populations, however. It became widespread in Europe during the Neolithic farming expansions around 7,000 to 5,000 years ago, and thus it is commonly associated with early European farmer ancestry. You can see that branches of H, T and K are also among the Pictish maternal markers, which are common European markers today still. So although this wasn't the largest sample size, which is a clear limitation of this study, it's good that we've actually got a clear academic study, a proper academic study into Pictish DNA, as opposed to just random speculation on the internet, which obviously isn't hard to find. So how can we sum up Pictish DNA in general then? Well, the Picts were largely the local descendants of earlier northern populations, whose distinctiveness lay primarily in the political organisation, elite culture, and symbolic traditions. They were neither an exotic intrusion nor a vanished race. Instead, they were part of the complex tapestry of early medieval Britain. And many modern Scots and those with Scottish ancestry around the world, especially those with deep roots in Western Scotland, likely carry substantial ancestry from the same Iron Age populations that formed the Pictish world. But is there more to this Scythian connection, even though not in the way that the origin stories suggest? Well, to find out, please click here. Thanks for watching, please subscribe and hit the bell, and let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and if you have Scottish ancestry. But yeah, thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time.